I finally made it to Australia, and for my first challenge of this trip, it's a stacked cheeseburger challenge. And also, it was quite the trek just to make it to this challenge. Oh, and by the way, just as a quick update on my documentation, yeah, things are still not looking good. But anyways, when it comes to these food challenge tours, this is actually going to be a great example of something that people might often overlook during these tours. And that is, the amount of traveling done on any given day. But more specifically, the day-to-day traveling that happens going to each challenge, whether that includes sightseeing or not. And because when we travel we try to be as budget-friendly as possible, sure, it might take a little bit more time, but hey, it's not that big of an issue. We're both pretty easygoing guys. Now, in this particular case, we were only making our way to the challenge, and this time around, there was a healthy mix between traveling by foot, by bus, and by train. And sometimes while we make our way to the restaurant, it can take an hour or two or even longer just to make it there. And also, sometimes when you're in foreign new lands, you might need a few more minutes to find your way.
I think I might have just ruined it. Central Station is that way.
Alright, so we're going back in?
I think so.
So yeah, that can also add to a little bit of travel time. Now while the difficulty or ease of traveling depends on the area, I will say that in this case, it was nice not having to be lugging around those huge backpacks. And the public transportation here in Sydney was pretty robust. Which, I guess that's kind of obvious considering it's the biggest city in Australia. And even getting lost and turned around a bit, getting a few extra steps here, it's not gonna hurt. And it's only gonna help build my appetite. So then after a few buses, trains, and a whole load of steps, I finally arrived to a restaurant known as Memphis Barbecue Pit, where the stage would be set for my very first food challenge of this trip. And so I continued on, walking into the restaurant to get a little look inside. And I've said this before, but I always enjoy walking into an American diner themed restaurant. You get to see all the red, white, and blue and all kinds of cool, iconic American memorabilia, and it always reminds me of a home away from home. But I was not here to reminisce about where I came from, but to forge my path forward and remember why I was here in the first place. So it was time to switch gears and put my game face on, because it was time for the battle to begin. And the battle is on, as I look to get my very first food challenge win in Australia. And it would not be an easy feat, as I'd have to take down this towering cheeseburger here at Memphis Barbecue Pit, where they host this stacked cheeseburger challenge known as the American Dream Burger Challenge. And there is a lot that makes up this colossal burger beast, including 12 1/3 pound burger patties, 24 rashers of bacon, and 12 slices of cheese. Then along with that mammoth of a burger comes 1 pound of their basket fries, and apparently because that wasn't enough, you also have a 1.5 liter of soda drink requirement. And of course, I'd be going with the tried and true Diet Coke, but in this case it was Coke Zero, which honestly I don't know if you can tell the difference, but I can. Now, if I'm being honest here, I wasn't exactly sure that for my first challenge in Australia, if I'd be experiencing the American dream here, or putting myself through a terrible nightmare, because this was a lot of food. And like I said before, it'd been a hot minute since my last challenge. And also, for this challenge, you only have 30 minutes to finish it. And if I failed to do so, I'd have to fork over 70 Australian dollars. And not to add even more pressure on myself, but before the challenge started, the restaurant informed me that while there were plenty of people who have attempted it, only one person had been able to conquer it before that day.
Well, that's just great.
But rather than focusing on those obstacles, I thought about what it would be like getting my first win in Australia. And if I could do that, not only would I get the meal for free, I'd also get a free shirt and get my picture up on their wall of fame. So first things first, right when I started, I went in to deconstruct this bad boy. And I immediately knew that the 6 bottom patties or so, they were still piping hot. So I had to take a few of those patties first and put them off to the side to cool off. Now, one thing I do have to admit here is that whenever I'm in a situation where I need to put part of the challenge off to the side, I do tend to overestimate just how fast the food will cool off. So a lot of the times when I come back around to it, it's actually cooled off way more than I'd prefer. But this really isn't a big deal, it's just not ideal. So in this case, I figured I'd try putting some of the patties off to the side for a little bit, then attack most of those other patties on the main plate, then maybe leave a patty or two, if at all, then switch back over to those patties I put aside, assuming they'd be cooled off by then, and then just go from there. So I did also have some water here, which could help with any temperature regulation, if you will. And you might be wondering, if the soda is required, why not just use that the entire time? And really, what it boils down to is that it's just simply my preference. Whether there's a drink requirement or not, I always prefer starting my challenges with water, then eventually switching to the diet soda. And also, as I mentioned in previous videos, I really enjoy those first few crisp and refreshing sips of soda. I just find it to be a nice little pick-me-up during the challenge. Now the difference here is that because there is a required drink, I am more aware of that. So I will be a little bit more conservative on the water use, and a little bit more aggressive when I switch over to the soda. Though if it was something like beer or another type of alcoholic beverage, I'd save that for the end and just simply chug it all down. As far as how this challenge tastes, the first thing other than the burgers being very hot is that they were very juicy, which made them easier to take down. Even with the bacon, which I typically separate and eat by itself because I tend to find that if I don't do that, I spend more time overall chewing it, but there was no need to worry about it here. Oh, and one other thing. These burgers, like I said, were very juicy, but also very greasy, which is fine for like the first 6 patties, which after that I found that the salty, sodium, savory, and greasy flavors, they were starting to wear me down. And the flavor fatigue from that was impacting my overall food fighting performance. But I did my best not to let it throw me off, while taking bite after bite of this huge burger behemoth. With only one burger patty and a few pieces of bacon left, I decided to make myself a normal burger. And since the bottom bun was absolutely soaked with all the juices and grease, it'd make it all go down just a little bit easier. But I'd be lying if I said powering through that bottom bun wasn't a challenge in and itself. And thinking about it now, I almost wonder if I should have just flipped it upside down, so I'd be tasting more of that top bun, because that was excellent, as it was very light and fluffy and all the other wonderful things you'd want with a burger bun. Now it's time for cleanup duty, finishing up all the bits and pieces that remain. And just when I thought the grease from the bottom soaked bun was bad, oh man, this was on a whole different level. I'm not gonna exactly describe how it tasted specifically, but I'll tell you this. Thank heavens for the diet soda here, because it was especially helpful at being the palate cleanser that it is. And I'd like to hear from you in the comments down below. At this point in time, if you were doing this challenge, would you be able to power through and finish? Or would you have to throw in the white flag, or white napkin in this case? Wow, getting through the last bits of that grease-soaked burger and remaining bits, that took a bit out of me. But I had to keep moving forward, making my way onto the fries. And I had to finish them without a whole lot of time. So I used a few fry ball specials, just to soften them up and make them easier to go down, and then continue to relentlessly attack these fries, as I set my sights on vanquishing this food fiend and getting my very first win on Australia. And besides, the king of rock and roll was watching, and there's no way I was gonna let him down.
There you go, Mitch. Boom!
There we go. My first win in Australia, baby, and it feels good. But the challenge isn't over, as with every food challenge victory, I follow it up with my iconic post-challenge victory push-ups. And in this case, I really didn't know how things would turn out, considering I was packing a newly formed greasy old food baby, and it was rough, but I managed to bust them out, which is good because I plan on doing a whole lot of push-ups over the course of this entire trip. So after this battle is over, we said our goodbyes to some very supportive fans, who not only helped cheer me on, but gave the big man and myself a ride to the train station. And then we made the trek back to our base of operations.
Randy, watch out for that pole.
And if you want to see what happens next, click on the video on the screen or in the link in the description down below, and I'll see you there.